Hey there, you're listening to Not Another TV Podcast. This is episode 24 in the week of October 27th, 2023. My name's Drew Koenig. With me, as always, is my co-host, Matt Sassy. Matt, how we doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good. Happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Halloween indeed.
To all of the weirdos who celebrate and the freaks who don't.
My job announced today that we're doing a costume competition, like bingo thing, get together on Tuesday. And I'm like, fuck, I don't want to be the only one not dressed up. I have to go find a costume. And my friend goes, sheet ghosts are still okay. And I'm tempted to actually do that because it's so easy.
It's solid.
It's classic. I don't like being perceived anyway, so it might work out.
Right. I was working the liquor store today, which is always good. The Friday and Saturday before Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to die at all. It was great.
That's good.
No notes.
No notes. How was your day? No notes.
No notes. Let's jump into some news. So the SAG-AFTRA strike is still ongoing. They have met with the AMPTP a couple times over the last week. And what we've heard so far sounds promising, but we've gone down this road before, so we will wait until anything concrete happens.
Until we know something official.
Yes, and that should always be standard operating procedure for everyone. Unless you hear it from the unions themselves, don't believe it.
Exactly.
I don't think there's been any big strike news.
Not really.
There was a letter signed by the majority of SAG-AFTRA that stated that they would rather wait for a good deal than settle for a bad one right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was a rumor going around that the AMPTP, if they couldn't reach a deal soon, was going to drag this out and not meet back at the negotiating table until 2024.
Yep.
And that letter was in response to that. If it has to take till next year, so be it.
Exactly. We'd rather have a great deal than settle for something shitty.
Yes. But beyond that, we will keep you all updated. In other news, actually, I want to talk about the recent study that came out from UCLA. Did you see this?
No, I don't think so.
It was a study on, I guess it was on Gen Z and their viewing habits, sort of, that came to the conclusion that Gen Z wants to see less sex on TV and wants more of a representation of platonic friendships. But I try not to get into like these generational things because not that long ago, not even that long ago, you would have headlines like out the ass of like millennials are having brunch too much. Millennials are killing brunch. Millennials are eating too much avocado. Millennials are actually shooting farmers in the on their farmland now. You see that?
Yes.
Killing farms.
I even remember some about how in the opposite direction of this study saying that millennials wanted too much sex with their television. Right. And it was just like, I don't know. I don't know if that's true either.
So I want to be a little charitable to Gen Z. Also, this is a generation that is still, good chunk of them are still teenagers.
Right.
They're still not actual people yet.
They're not, like, their favorite TV shows are ones like Heartstopper, which are cutesy high school dramas. So therefore, like, they're not thinking about those gritty, edgy, you know, horror, thriller, drama stuff that's, that's out there. So it's like, how valid are these results?
That and like the majority of sex that we see on TV anymore is from Euphoria or Game of Thrones or Riverdale,
Mhm.
which is not a good uh, not a
I
good
will say,
representation of what sex
having
is.
watched the first episode of Fellow Travelers, there is a lot of gay sex in that, which is not a bad thing. And it's also Showtime. So, like, are we really that surprised? And that's the thing is, like, you're not going to see explicit sex scenes unless they're on HBO, Showtime, things that you pay for,
Right.
because they're not going to put that on prime television
Mhm.
where anyone could watch it. But yes, and if you want to see Matt Bomer having sex, go watch Fellow Travelers. You will be thoroughly impressed, I guess. I don't know. I don't really judge sex scenes. That's not my thing, but sure.
Right.
There were at least 3 in an hour-long episode, so that's a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and my question's kind of, are Gen Z not comfortable seeing sex on TV, or are they not used to seeing sex on TV at all, or in movies at all? Because the amount of sex that you actually see anymore, like, is not very high.
Right, they do a lot of fade to blacks.
Yeah, or it's just not there at all. Like,
Right.
a lot of TV and movies are like very sexless.
Mm-hmm.
And look, in fairness, some people that write sex are bad at it. Like,
Yeah, they are.
I always remember American Gods when they were making the first season, and there's a there's a gay sex
Are you
scene.
talking about this sex goddess?
No, I don't think it's a sex goddess, but it was a different episode that had a gay sex scene.
Oh, the gay sex scene. Okay.
And Brian
Well,
and
because there
Brian
was also
Fuller.
the sex goddess who would eat men for their energy while she had sex with them.
Oh yes, yes, which is I have no notes about that. But Brian Fuller, who created American Gods, or was the showrunner for American Gods, so like what they had for the sex scene, I was like, so is his dick just really big, or what's happening here? Because this isn't physically possible. So some of the people making sex are not necessarily proficient at it, which admittedly is a skill we've lost at, like.
Yeah. Like, okay, so I've mentioned this a few times. I've been rewatching Queer as Folk from like the early 2000s, and that show was like porn with plot. Like, that's literally what it was. And like, it makes me think, I'm like, people don't know how to write sex anymore. Like, they back in the early 2000s we did, because we were like, we need to put it out there because otherwise people are going to do it wrong. And it was done well. The sex part was done well on this show, but like some of the other stuff, you're just like, but some of the sex stuff you see now, you're just like, no, that's so cringe. That's so cringe.
Right, yeah. Well, part of the problem, I think, is that like people aren't able to differentiate like porn from actual sex on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Simulated sex versus like actual porn.
My favorite TikTok account right now is this guy who is part of the book community, and he sits and reads MLM books,
Mm.
and then he reviews the butt stuff in the books on how accurate it is. He's like, this book idea, he goes, I stopped reading this book after the first sex scene because they had the guys eating tacos and then having butt sex, and that was dumb. He's like, because you don't eat Mexican before you have butt sex.
No, you don't.
And he's just like, this was clearly a woman writing men having sex. Like, he's my favorite because he's just so funny about it too. And he's just like, and he literally introduces his videos as, I'm the gay guy that talks about butt stuff in books. But yeah, no, like it's become kind of a problem, I feel that, and it's mostly because in our society, it's weird to say it this way, but like in our society, women are more accepted to write gay male stuff than male gay men are. So it's like, so they do it wrong, and then people think, oh no, that's actually cute and that's accurate, and you're just like, no, that's not.
Well, it's not. No.
So,
well, the book thing is, I think, is like an interesting point of like, because like if you spend any amount of time on like book talk, you see like the way that a lot of people describe books like are like, were they spicy or not? Like this had spice and I liked it. And like that not translating to movies and TV.
Yeah.
Which I find really interesting. But the other part of the study I do think is there's a good bit of validity to it of Gen Z wants to see like more of an emphasis on like platonic friendships, which is like, yes, this is things that I think everyone also wants to see. But there's no reason there can't be room for both.
Absolutely. And like honestly, platonic, co-ed platonic friendships has been something that I've been begging for from television since I was like 10 years old.
Right.
I'm like, just because that's a guy and a girl doesn't mean they have to have sex with each other. Doesn't mean they have to kiss. They could just be friends. Like, so much. I'm just like, they deserve to just be friends.
Yeah. And my thing of it is that platonic friendships are usually only reserved for like people of the same sex. So like,
unless the characters are queer.
Yeah, explicitly queer. Like they have to be explicitly queer. Kara and Lena on Supergirl, or the gays on 911.
The gays on 911.
The guys on 911. Or like,
because let's be real, they're actually gay.
Yeah. I don't need to dispute this fact.
I just love that you called them the gays instead of the guys. That's hilarious to me.
I don't know their names, but I just know this is Gay Firefighter Show.
Buck and Eddie. Yeah. Not that you need to know, but I know. Buck and Eddie.
The next little thing here was that there were a couple updates on shows while everything is still on strike. The first is that apparently Sam Esmail is still making a Battlestar Galactica show after 4 years.
Oh.
Which we don't need, but okay. Like, we did Battlestar Galactica. We did that, and you tried with Caprica. It didn't work. I watched that season. Not a great season. I don't know what more Battlestar Galactica is going to be, but okay. Go off, Sam Esmail. And also, there was an update on the upcoming Fallout series on Amazon Prime Video, which got a release date for April, which is going to be really weird, actually, in the same, like, right after Silo came out, because they're essentially the same show.
Oh, okay.
Because, like, the lore of Fallout is that, like, there was, like, a radioactive...
Do they live in a fallout shelter?
Like, the beginning of the games are always that they're in a fallout shelter. Literally, the mythology of the games is that, like, there was a radioactive Armageddon, and there were a bunch of, or I don't know, really, actually, I'm not sure if that first part was right, but there was a bunch of, like, fallout shelters that were created, and they eventually became like these social experiments where like there were a bunch of fallout shelters and everyone just like fuck with the people inside it pretty much. So like it's just Silo, like a lot of that's very Silo. So it's gonna be really interesting. In what way actually differentiates itself? Because like I said, the beginning of like every Fallout game is like them in the Fallout shelters, and then like shit goes bad and like they spend the rest of the game outside of it and like.
I have found it interesting that lately they've been making a lot of like films and TV shows centered on video games.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, have we reached that point? I guess we have.
I guess we have, like, after Arcane and The Last of Us, I guess we have figured out something.
Spoiler alert, I saw Five Nights at Freddy's and it was only okay.
It was only okay. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that was always going to happen.
They made it PG-13, so like it can't really be a horror film if it's PG-13, or at least in my opinion. It cannot be a horror film if it's a PG-13 film. Like that's not horror.
Well, and Five Nights at Freddy's is so weird.
Yeah. But there were people that I talked to that watched it and they were like, I was hiding in my sweater the whole time. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It wasn't even scary. Like, it was so predictable.
I do feel like it was made for, like, younger teens.
It was. Yeah, it was made for, like, kids.
Yeah, like, kids and young, like, tweens.
Yeah.
But I am pretty excited to see, like, what shape a Fallout show actually takes.
Could be interesting.
Yeah, because Variety built it as a drama, which is very funny because Fallout is like a kind of farcical satire.
Oh, interesting.
Like, it has like very zany parts to it. So it won't be The Last of Us, you know?
Right.
So I have no idea what this show will look like.
Yeah.
No idea.
This week, they also announced the release dates for the Doctor Who 60th anniversary special, which is near and dear to my heart. So I cared about it. Anyways.
That's going to be a wild week on the podcast.
November 25th for the first one. And then they do it the next Saturday and the next Saturday because it's a 3-part.
Cool.
So there you go. For
we
3 weeks.
We may end up talking about part of that in the next year.
At some point, yes.
Yeah, well, when we come back next year.
Yes. That's what I'm saying. At some point.
At some point.
It's fine. I will always sit down and talk about David Tennant.
Let's jump into the GOAT. So, the GOAT is a weekly segment we do here on the podcast where myself and Mads will nominate a best TV character or episode of all time and pit them against each other on a poll on Twitter and TikTok. Last week, I nominated Buffy the Vampire Slayer Season 5, Episode 16, entitled The Body. And Mads nominated Lucius from Our Flag Means Death. I skated away with the victory this week by a mere point.
It's still a win.
It's a win. A win's a win.
A win is a win.
Even a garbage win is a win.
To be fair, I feel like they were evenly matched. Like, they were definitely two things that people love. So I'm honestly not that surprised it was only by 1 vote.
So, since I won this week, Mads, you get to go first with your new pick of the GOAT.
Alrighty. So, my pick this week is actually one of my favorite characters that has been a part of my life for quite a long time. I don't really remember the first time I watched Law & Order SVU, but this character has definitely been one of those ones that, like, I absolutely adore. And I'm talking about Olivia Benson on Law & Order SVU. She is strong and she has she is strong. She has perseverance. I cannot talk this evening. And she honestly just, like, she has faced down some of the baddest criminals and just walked away. Not perfectly fine, but pretty damn close. I think the worst thing that she had to handle was when she got kidnapped, and she was assaulted and beat up, and she beat the shit out of that guy, and the guy still had the gall to like take her to court and try to convince people that he was the good guy in the situation. But yeah, Olivia Benson just doesn't back down. She's very strongly passionate about making sure victims' voices are heard, and she's just a great, strong female presence in the television landscape, especially now. And sure, the show's been on for longer than it probably should be, but she's still a character that I love to watch and love to see interact with the other characters. So my pick this week is Olivia Benson.
Nice. So I make this next pick recognizing that I do not care if I win. But I make this pick anyways because I greatly enjoy it. So I am taking it back. I'm taking it way back. This episode is the 45th anniversary of its air. And it is...
You're really taking it back.
Really taking it back. It says WKRP in Cincinnati, Season 1, Episode 7, entitled Turkeys Away. If any of you out there have not watched WKRP in Cincinnati, I don't blame you for this. So it is about a radio station in Cincinnati who has brought on this new guy, and he's bringing in new changes, and he's trying to figure out how to make the radio station more innovative and profitable and successful. And so this episode finds Mr. Carson, who is the owner of the radio station, but it's kind of been shoved aside a little bit, and he's kind of like grappling with a lot of the changes happening at the radio station, and so he decides to come up with his own promotional event for the radio station during Thanksgiving. And this is where like the real magic of the episode comes in with Les Nessman, who is the kind of on-site reporter, has this scene where he is at a shopping center witnessing, waiting for this big thing that's going to happen that no one knows what it is. And the beauty of the scene is that it is just solely focused on him, and you don't see anything else that's happening in the scene. It's a very minimalist way of doing it, but it's works so beautifully here. And you get to see his dawning realization as Mr. Carlson has brought a helicopter to circle around the parking lot. And Les's horror as he realizes that turkeys are being released from the helicopter. An important note: turkeys cannot fly. They cannot fly. They 100% cannot fly. So it is his horrified realization in this parking lot as turkeys are being dropped to the ground, smashing on cars, and everyone is fleeing around him. And it's wonderfully cut back to like the control room as everyone else working at the radio station is realizing that this deeply idiotic thing is occurring in real time. And the episode is punctuated very nicely with Mr. Carlson going, "For the life of me, I thought turkeys could fly." I just watched the episode. I just watched bits of the episode today on YouTube, and it's just still so fucking funny. Like, it's so funny. So that is my pick for WKRP in Cincinnati, Season 1, Episode 7, Turkeys Away.
You're right. I am not one of those people that has ever seen that show.
It's a very amusing show. It's very late 70s, but
yeah, I've heard of it, but I've never sat down and like watched it. So maybe I will, because
It's
that sounds hilarious.
so those are our picks for this week. Be sure to check out our Twitter and TikTok pages for the poll. You'll have 2 days to vote once they go up. And be sure to vote and like and share on whatever social platforms you're currently using. And without further ado, let's move on into the main part of our show.
Dun, da, 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 dun, dun. Making your way in the world today takes everything you've got. Taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. Wouldn't it be nice to get away? Where everybody knows your name. Where everybody...
So, our first show for this week is we are continuing our rewatch of Adventure Time with Season 5, Episode 14, Simon and Marcy, Season 5, Episode 28, Be More, and Episode 29, Sky Witch.
We know how I feel about Simon. So Simon and Marcy was probably one of my favorite episodes.
Yes. It is, first off, an extremely excellent episode. It's also deeply emotional.
As any story with the Ice King and Marceline is, but yeah, this one was especially rough. Like, it was definitely shows the love that Simon had for Marcy when he could remember that he knew Marcy, and when he was still Simon, because he like realizes she's sick, and they're in the middle of this, for lack of a better word, wasteland, and he's like, I have to find you chicken soup. And it's so sad watching him try to find chicken soup and she gets sick, and it's just
right, so like it's just them navigating the post-apocalypse.
Yeah.
That we saw from the farm world at the beginning of the season.
Yes.
Like the farm world that was just allowed to be the apocalypse. I've watched this episode multiple times. I used to watch it like in conjunction with I Remember You, which
do you like yourself?
Maybe I don't recommend that.
I was gonna say, do you like yourself? Because that seems like a terrible thing to do.
It's a lot. It's a lot. I'm always kind of amazed that this episode managed to weaponize the Cheers theme song.
Yes. Oh.
For a generation of kids that probably have never watched Cheers.
It's funny you say that, because I grew up watching Cheers because it was the only way that I could convince my mom to let me stay up past my bedtime.
Yep, me too.
Was to stay up and watch. I would assume at the point I was watching them was probably reruns. But I mean, when I was young, they were probably the tail end of the series. But by the time I had recognition of it, it was reruns, and she would let me stay up if I watched them.
The episode kind of you talked about Marcy getting sick, and it builds off of the season 1 episode where Ice King got the candy people sick from his beard flakes from the snow. And that simple like imagery of like Marceline accidentally like eating Ice King Snow, or Simon Snow when he has the crown on, and then it's like, oh no, you're just supposed to make that connection.
Yeah, I honestly, I watched this episode a couple times, and the second time I realized, oh, and I made that connection.
Yeah. And the end with him doing the actual howling, like it's not the soup that helps Marceline. It is like Simon trying to keep it together. That helps her.
Yep.
Which is very poignant and makes me want to die. So that's
it's very deep, and like meaningful, and you're just like, okay, but this is a kid's show. What is going on here?
Right.
This is supposed to be, ha ha ha. Maybe sometimes I cry because that's cute, but like, no, this isn't supposed to like break my damn heart.
Yes. Uh, yeah. And it all being framed just around like Finn and Jake playing basketball with Marceline and Ice King.
Yeah.
And
And he's like, Marcy, tell another story. I want to keep making baskets. And so she just stands there and watches him make more baskets because she's just like, I just want to watch you have fun.
Yeah. And it's this continuing thing of like Finn and also kind of Jake having this measure of empathy for Ice King.
Mm-hmm.
Constantly kind of like appreciating who he is.
The more they learn about him too, like you see it come out even more strongly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which shows that despite their age and their maturity levels, they do have the ability to learn and grow.
Yes. Yeah, which is one of Adventure Time's most consistent themes. But yeah, just this episode is always a gut punch.
Yeah. But I like gut punch episodes, so like I said, this is one of my favorites. Because I also just love the bond between Marceline and Simon/Ice King.
Right. Yes. And the voice that Tom Kenny does for Simon is just so good.
Mm-hmm.
And so distinct from Ice King.
Yes.
Like just the normalcy of it. And also Little Marcy is very cute.
Very cute. I also kind of like Marceline with her hair up in a ponytail for basketball. Like that was kind of cute.
Yep. One of many interesting looks for Marceline in these episodes. Let's move on to Be More, which is a BMO-centric episode. We get to figure out where BMO came from.
And Aziz Ansari voices the tour guide, whatever. Which I was like, wait, that voice sounds familiar. I was like, that sounds like Tom Haverford. And then I was like, that is Aziz Ansari.
It's Aziz Ansari.
Because my brain automatically goes to Parks and Rec because that's just who I am.
Yeah.
But literally, like, I forget what it was that he had said that I was like, wait a minute, that sounds like Tom Haverford.
There is a moment where he's like, get off my tram, and it's very Tom Haverford.
Yes. I think it was something else that he had said, but yeah, similar to that. Like, it was just like, oh yeah, that's definitely very Aziz Ansari comedic voice.
So something I enjoy about this episode is it is weirdly sexual. Because you have the beginning of it with basically masturbating.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's basically what it is.
And then in order to figure out where they need to go, they have to slide into the back end of the other machine. I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? What are we doing here?
Well, and the end, where they meet Mo and Finn or Jake is like, we just saw all those surface jerks, all those jerky jerks upstairs, and Mo goes, those are just the surface jerks. And I'm just like, oh my God.
It goes there.
Yeah.
It's one of those examples of kids programming being like, we understand that there are some older people watching this, so we're going to make jokes that they understand.
But this is a very good BMO episode.
It is. I liked him finding out that like he's not alone. Like there's other ones like him. It's super cute.
Right, and it's this wonderful thing of like in Adventure Time you get to realize that like there are all these like weird little worlds inhabiting that you're like aren't always aware of. And there's just like this whole entire robot community in what is essentially the wastelands of Adventure Time. Like,
yeah. And there's this little old man who is more machine than man at this point, and he just loves his little machines.
Yeah, who is legitimately like 1,000 years old.
He's legitimately 1,000 years.
But I do love how like all the other robots treat BMO with this reverence. Like BMO's a big deal.
They're like, "Oh, you're a BMO?"
Yeah, because I think the implication is that like there was only ever one BMO.
Yeah, because he made him as his son.
Yeah. And because BMO is so incredibly special, because he has this thing that like robots aren't supposed to have. They aren't supposed to have like this level of like fun and imagination and creativity.
And childlike nature to them.
Yes.
That's exactly what it is. Like he's very childlike, and not in a bad way. Like he just has that energy of a child that just is so intrigued by the world around him, and he just wants to have a good time and play.
Right. Well, it's kind of like goes back to one of the previous episodes we watched, BMO Noir,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, yeah, when you're a kid, you just like kind of make up these fantasy worlds for yourself when you're bored. You just like create like these grandiose lives for yourself about like Knight going to face a dragon or
Right.
like I remember playing with like a bunch of like Star Wars figures when I was a kid and just like enacting an entire like fake movie with it. Like those are things
My sisters and I used to do Power Rangers outside.
Yeah. Like, and that's just like a thing that is so specific to being a kid. That BMO is able to tap into really well. Which is what makes the beginning of the episode with him masturbating even funnier. Or better. Because it is like a preteen like figuring things out,
Yeah. He's like, "Oh, that's what that does." Okay.
Interesting. Like it's very endearing. Well, like when Finn and Jake asked him what happened, he's like, "I didn't do anything."
That's a very like preteen response to masturbating. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't do nothing.
I just had to really go to the bathroom
for 10 minutes.
So let's move on to Sky Witch, which is a big Bubblegum and Marceline episode. Bubblegum and Marceline just get to go on like this little adventure together.
We love it.
Yeah, and
I love that Marceline was just like, I've decided we're going on this together.
Right, yes. Well,
because Bubblegum's like, no, I don't think we should do that. And she's like, too bad, we are.
Yeah, and especially, I think it's interesting, Marceline asking Bubblegum to come with her when she could easily ask Finn and Jake. And there's a very conscious decision she makes to ask Bubblegum. Because she respects Bubblegum's intellect and her know-all, and also maybe she just wants to hang out with Bubblegum.
I was gonna say this was like an episode that was very much like, I'm like, okay, if you ship them together, this is that moment that you're like, oh look, she invited her of all people because she likes her.
Right. Well, and the beginning of the episode with like Bubblegum having Marceline's rock shirt on and sniffing it. Yep. That was a moment where I was like, Bubblegum, you need to go back to sleep and you can wake up again when you're feeling less gay. Like, that's just... that's...
It's a little too gay in here right now.
You need to calm down. I love Bubblegum in this episode. She's a little monster, but she's so endearing, and like there's a moment where Bubblegum is like kind of like dismayed that like they're going after Hambo, and she just takes this shot at Raggedy Princess for no reason.
Yeah,
and you're just like, Bubblegum, that is such mean girl shit.
It's very much jealousy green eyes. Like, it's very petty. It's very teenage girly, and I love it.
Right. Yes. And that interaction is great because, like, you see Marceline on the other side of that just, like, barely keeping it together. of like,
She's like, what is going on?
Marceline's just like, I could beat her ass right now,
Yeah.
but I'm not gonna, but I could.
Good self-restraint there,
It's
Marceline.
very good self-restraint. But also, like, I love the way that, like, you kind of get to see into Bubblegum's mind a little bit of, like, how her mind works. Like, her, like, trying to figure out which way Majo would have gone, and, like, and really doubling down on the fact that, like, Bubblegum's very intelligent. She didn't just, like, happenstance into, like, creating candied life forms, you know?
She really, really is. Like, I don't think about it too often because, she's very much, sunshine, rainbows, and weird creatures that she creates. Like, you don't think about, oh, there's an intelligence behind all of that.
Right, yeah. Well, and this kind of goes to, there was a tweet I saw the other day talking about, like, the differences in outfits for Bubblegum, but also Marceline as the show goes on, and how they become more complicated. They become more things that a real person would wear versus a princess. Finn realizing that this is not just like a princess, this is like a real actual person. This is a real girl.
Yeah.
And so, like, in this episode, you have, like, Marceline's, like, Marceline's doing all look in this episode. But also, like, Bubblegum has, like, the pink, like, turtleneck and, like, more interesting clothes, than just, like...
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. I literally was just like, oh, they're on an adventure. She's going to wear adventure clothing instead of a dress.
Yeah, and to go back to, like, what you were saying about, like, Bubblegum and Marceline shippers, like, Bubblegum clearly does not care about Hambo at all, but was very willing to sacrifice a shirt that means a lot to her for Marceline. It was a shirt given to her by Marceline, and she will sacrifice it for Marceline. And at the same time, put her kingdom at risk, because she, like, at the beginning of the episode, we see her, like, very cognizantly aware that, like, shit's starting to ramp up. She could be in some trouble. Like, her kingdom could, be experiencing something in the coming future. And you gave a very sentimental object to a witch, which Bubblegum has to be aware of.
Right.
So it does kind of go to, like, it hints at the depths of which Bubblegum actually does care about Marceline. Maybe more complicated than just, like, girl that she's forced to hang out with sometimes, girl that she's forced to see occasionally. Let's move on to our next show of the week, which is Dimension 20 Fantasy High. Episode 5, The Pixie and the Palimpsest. So the interesting thing about these roleplay episodes is that we could not possibly list everything that happens in this episode.
No.
There's so much.
So much happened in like an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah. They do so much setup work to get to the next battle episode.
And I like that there was at one point in the episode, Brennan even says, all right, we're going to pause for a moment and we're going to do some downtime and we're going to make the time pass because we need to get there.
Right, yes. Absolutely.
But of all the things that happened, I think one of my favorite moments was when they go to Gorgug's house. And the whole group interacts with Gorgug's parents. Like, it's just adorable and funny. Like, and then his parents are like, oh, you need help? Sure, we'll help you.
Yeah, we got this.
But we don't want you to get in trouble, so we won't help you too much.
Yeah, no, there's some great interactions with parents this episode.
Yes. And, like, Adelaide's like, I'm starting to realize that my parents really suck.
Oh yeah, they're real bad.
And we're like, yes, they do.
So they are, yeah, and Fabian with his dad, just
And the
commiserating
bike.
over spoils.
Yes. But yeah, it was a great episode. We get a lot of more. I feel like we got more personality development from these characters
Mhm.
because they each had their own little thing that they were doing at some point.
Right.
Fig with the texting was just
Oh, it's so good.
so good. And then Fig with getting them into the black pit, like so good.
Here's
She's like, I'm a bouncer too. And she rolls a good enough roll that like
hmm.
he believes her.
Here's the thing about Fig's lies is she commits to them.
Yeah.
Just full
Yep.
commitment to these lies.
I love it so much.
It's so good. Yeah, like we have a lot of good stuff this episode. Like Riz trying to figure out stuff with the AV club. And also having like an existential crisis of like, oh, I could be these people.
Yeah.
These are the people I could have been like a week ago.
I honestly like I had to keep remembering that Biz is tiny. Like
Right.
and they even say that too. They're like, "Oh right, I keep forgetting that Biz is tiny." Like he's not normal sized like us. Like not that they're normal sized, but like he's not bigger like us.
Yeah, and speaking of him, I love the interactions between him and Adine. She took
Yeah.
every possible opportunity she could to cut him down to size.
She's like, she goes, "Don't take this the wrong way. Don't take this meanly, but," and then she'll be mean as hell. And he's like, "How am I supposed to take that?"
No, it's like the ultimate like girl talking to a nice guy. Like it's
Yeah.
just it's everything a girl has ever wanted to say to one of those guys. And it's very good.
And it's funny because he's definitely one of those guys that's like, "But I'm a nice guy," and we're like, "No, you're not, bro."
No, you're not. I did love the part where Fabian has to hang out with the other two AV guys.
Yes.
I could have watched that interaction for an hour. Like just the constant back and forth between Fabian, like the ultimate cool guy.
Yeah.
Basically. And these two just nerds.
Just big nerds.
Big nerds. It's so good.
It's fantastic, honestly. And of course, Brennan is just so good at voices that you're just like you forget that he's one person doing like 5 million voices.
Right, like his voice for Shelford and like the deliberate slowness of it. Oh, it's so good.
I was speaking of Brennan, there's been these videos that have been popping up on my social media. And he's in them. I forget what it's called, but it's like some like game show thing where they have to do different voices or whatever.
Yeah.
There was one that popped up the other day where he had to be Dominatrix DM.
Yeah, I told you about. That's what I was telling you about. Yes.
Okay, but this it just happened to come across my timeline, and I'm just like, this is hilarious as shit.
Yeah.
Like it's so funny.
No, the only thing better than like Brennan's actual delivery of that is Erica, the girl, the person on his left, is losing their shit.
He's like, "Oh yeah, do that, but maybe you gotta roll a athletic check there." Like it's so funny, it's hilarious, and I'm like, "Oh my god, I did not know that DMs could become very sexual." Like this is funny.
Now, the only thing that makes that clip even better is that his wife is to his right.
But no, so then I went on a deep dive and I watched a ton of these kinds of clips.
Yes.
And I'm like, he's just so talented,
He's
and
so
I love
good.
it.
He is so good. No, if you should definitely watch more of those because it becomes very clear that Brennan is perhaps the most competitive person on the planet. Brennan has famously been said, "There is no depth of my soul that I will not bring out for a single point."
They've been glorious. Anyways, back to Dimension 20.
Yeah. I loved Kristen's stuff this episode as like her continuing like basically Christianity deconstruction.
Oh my god, the cornbread moment. They're like, well, Riz is like, I don't think any of us want to see corn ever again. And then someone else goes, I forget if it was Gorgug or Adeline, but they were like, isn't that your god? Like, are you cooking your god?
Oh yeah, I think it was Adeline. Yeah.
Adeline, I was just like, I can't. This is hilarious. She's like, well, yeah, that's like how we like worship him. And it's just like, what? You're just pulling shit out of your ass at this point. I brought cornbread. Wait, do you guys want to maybe still be on the prayer circle? And they're like, no.
Oh. But also, Kristen is having also like at the end, her having like a sexuality crisis.
Yes.
And I love Allie's like nat ones on that. Just be like, she seems like a cool girl. Yeah. She seems really into this conversation with you. And like that's one of the ways that like the roles really inform character. It's just like,
yeah,
Kristen's just like oblivious, like hopelessly oblivious. Hand on your knee, none. Got none for that. Although Tracker, I don't recommend kissing a straight girl you just met. I don't recommend that. But you did turn into a werewolf, or you did transform like 30 seconds later. So let's move on to our next show this week, which is Bob's Burgers, season 14, episode 3, titled "The Piccolorette."
Can I just say that the game that she makes them play, veterinarian or whatever the hell it was, I'm like, this is the most boringest game I have ever heard in my life. And I'm like, that adds to this character. Somehow this just fits.
Yeah, no, it's 100% a game I can imagine Tina wanting to play.
Yeah.
Like, fully wanting to play. And the fact that she ends up hating it is even better.
Yeah. And then they go down to the setup strip club in the restaurant. And she gets mad because they stand up on the counters and she can't see.
It's the perfect distillation of the two things that Tina is. A horse girl and impossibly horny.
Yes. And the whole scene with the two sisters, I forget their names, the friends of of what's her name. And that whole scene and then again, I'm terrible at all of their names because I'm just now starting this show, so like I'm not familiar yet. The younger sister, we had her name, Tina's younger sister. Why can I not think of her name? Louise is like, oh, I see what you're doing for me, Tina. And Tina's like, yeah, uh-huh. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's not your sister dynamic, Louise.
No, certainly not.
Also, why is the strip club called the Pickle? Like,
it's a great
or
question.
The Pickle Room or whatever. I'm like, I can't.
It's a, you know what? It's a small seaside town.
It is indeed.
But yeah, I love this episode episode was a bunch of fun, a good way to come back from the week it was off. Yeah, it doesn't do a whole lot, like, in terms of anything, but it's a very funny one-off, where they get to just make Bob do a bunch of outlandish things.
Make Bob do a ton of stupid shit that he's just like, I'm not very proficient at any of this. And like he manages to get strippers only because they felt sorry for him.
Let's move on then to Our Flag Means Death, season 2, episode 8, entitled Merman.
All right, so you're finally caught up.
I am.
How did you enjoy the Calypso's birthday episode?
I did enjoy that quite a bit. Okay. So this is not about the quality of any of these episodes, but while watching, particularly like the back half of this season, it did bring to mind, like, this is one of 2 shows this year, the other being Star Trek Strange New Worlds, where I felt that the show, while still good, would greatly benefit from a bigger season.
Yeah. And that's not an uncommon opinion about Our Flag season 2. Like, it would have benefited from having the same number of episodes as the previous season. It also would have benefited from having the same level of budget as the previous season, because that affected things as well. They had a lesser budget and less episodes. Yeah. And so, like, you could tell. The writing was still good. It just was very much, okay, we need to cram all of our ideas into 8 episodes.
Right, yes. And I wish that this was more akin to, like, a regular season of television, not necessarily a, 20 episode season, but one where you could have, the weird digressions of a comedy, the zigs and the zags, the weird bits, the valleys and the highs. And here, you just have it distilled to its core properties. And
well, and I feel like that rushing quality is even more apparent in the finale, especially during, and this is a big spoiler if you haven't watched the episode, during the moments of Izzy being killed. Izzy dies, and they bury him, and 2 seconds later, there's a marriage. Like, it's literally like you don't have time to sit in that grief for a minute. And so it's like, I feel like it's very hollow. And so a lot of fans are like, it was a meaningless death and da-da-da-da. And I'm like, I benefited from watching it multiple times before anyone else was able to see it, because I was able to sit in it and process it properly and then be like, okay, this is my opinion on this.
So the finale is fine. It's perfectly fine. Izzy's death, I don't love it. For a lot of the reasons that you've stated, I don't feel like it has any of the weight that it needs to. It just kind of happens, and I go, oh, okay. Izzy's dead now. A character that I quasi-liked. Even though, like, in episode 7, when Izzy's talking to Steed at Spanish Jackie's, and he's talking to him about Ed, I went, oh, Izzy's gonna die.
Right.
Got it. Izzy's gonna die. This was before I heard the spoilers that Izzy was going to die in that episode, or that Izzy had died in that episode.
Yeah. They built up to it, and you could kind of feel it coming all season long, because here's the thing. This is something that television likes to do. They like to take a character that is quote unquote a villain, redeem him, only to kill him.
Yes.
So I kind of figured it was going to happen. So, like, I'm not as devastated by it as some fans are. There are a lot of Izzy fans that are attacking David Jenkins at this point, because they are angry about it. This is also the moment when I'm like, okay, you need to get off the internet for a little bit and go step outside. Because there were some people that were like, well, David Jenkins killing this character who was suicidal at the beginning of the season is basically telling me that you want me to die. And I'm like, that is not what he is saying at all.
I mean, I moderately like Disney. But
right.
I'm not devastated by this because I don't feel like it had a lot of the weight that it needed to have, but also I don't disagree that it does feel meaningless. It does feel like, oh, this is just a thing that happened, instead of like
so
actually concrete reason that this happened. Instead, it just feels like we lost like a big presence on the show.
So it took me a couple watches for me to like really like think about what they were intending with it, whether it completely came through properly or not. But the intention is that Izzy is that crutch that Ed always relies on. You know, like he's like, oh, things aren't going great with anybody else. I can at least rely on Izzy to be there because, you know, whatever. He's never gonna fully like embrace who he really is versus who the world sees him as, because Izzy, even though Izzy has grown a lot this season, Izzy is still there to remind him who the world sees him as. Does that make sense?
Right.
And so like I saw it as, okay, granted they needed another episode in between to be able to be like, this is what's going on, this is what's going to happen and why it's going to happen. But Izzy dying was so that Blackbeard or Ed could get rid of Blackbeard, so to speak, in a healthy way and move forward in his life and fully commit to loving Steed and being there for the crew in a loving and respectful way. And like, I don't know, like people were upset because they're like, he deserved to have his own happiness, you know, after having discovered himself and realized himself. And I'm like, to me, Izzy's happiness is giving this future to Ed, because Ed's the one person he's ever loved. And he knows that Ed's never going to love him back that in the way that he wants. So his happiness is letting Ed have his happiness. So like in a way I saw it as that, but again, execution was not perfect. Therefore, most people aren't going to see that unless they sit there and think critically about it long enough.
Yeah, and whether or not I agree with your interpretation, the show expects too much of you to make that map.
Yep.
You know, you, the viewer, should not have to jump those mental gymnastics to come to that conclusion for this death to work. You know.
Yes.
So I think that's where a lot of that is coming for me.
The other less complicated mental gymnastics version of it is, okay, well, see, look at it as this. Izzy is the mentor. Izzy is Steed's mentor, so to speak, because he taught Steed this whole season on how to be a real pirate. And if we're going the route of the mentor journey or the hero journey, the mentor has to go away in the second act and then come back in some way in the third act once the person they were mentoring has come into their own and like proven themselves.
Right.
So I don't know. Maybe it was that, because David has made some mentions of, well, Izzy's the mentor, and he's also tweeted out that there's no version of Her Flag without Izzy. So I'm like, does that mean you're bringing him back in some capacity in season 3? Which, as ridiculous and over the top as this show is, I could see them bringing in the Sea Witch element and being like, look at this, Izzy is, you know, Buttons has helped Izzy in some sea witchy kind of way.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like
Buttons turned into a bird, so I don't feel like.
Well, and Buttons showed up at the end of the episode on Izzy's grave, so
yeah,
I'm connecting things. But no, but like there are many different ways you can interpret it, and then there could be also just the way of he just doesn't know how to write a good enough redemption happy story for Izzy that he was like, I have to get rid of him. It could be any of those things. We don't know. We're not the writer.
As for the fans reacting to this, I think a lot of people they've lost a sense of the difference between good hurt and bad hurt. because there's been so much bad hurt in terms of character deaths on TV. I watched,
especially with queer characters.
yes, I watched 100. I've been there. We've all had a lot of bad character deaths. I'm of the opinion that a good character death makes a show better. So in this case, I'm not sure that this is a move that makes the show better. I can't not say that either. I'm also a person who claimed that Quentin's death on The Magicians was good hurt. So,
well, and I see it as I'm leaving it up to hopefully season 3 to determine it better, because here's the thing: the death happened in the last 5 minutes of the show.
right.
So we have no way of knowing how it's going to impact the show, because we didn't have time with it. So who's to say it's not going to make the show stronger? It could, we don't know. It could go either way. Basically, it could go either way.
Right.
I don't care too strongly either way about this character. So I'm kind of resigned to, okay, whatever, and there are some fans that are also upset because they're you're killing a queer elder, which we don't get elder queers very often. And I'm just but everyone on this show is technically an elder queer. So you can't really be too upset about that. Yes, Izzy was a little bit older than the rest of them, but they're all middle-aged men. They're not young little high schoolers.
Right. Well, and making that argument feels weird to me because Izzy's queerness has always felt very ambiguous. Right?
Yep.
It's always felt kind of nebulous to me. So I can't say that I've ever really come at it from that angle.
Neither have I. Honestly, and the other angle that a friend of mine pointed out to me, which I completely see the validity of that angle and as to why they're upset about it. They're not upset about the death per se because of who it is. They're upset because he was a physically disabled character and he actually showed good representation for people that are physically disabled. And they were this was a disability death, and and the fact that it didn't seem well thought out and well explored before, saying bye to the season makes me feel very upset about it. And I'm I can understand that. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Not because it's Izzy, it's because, okay, this person was disabled and you killed them and then said, okay, season over.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
So I get it. But it's a very complicated death, and it'll be interesting to see whether or not we get a season 3, which I don't see it not happening at this point because the numbers are so good for this show. But when we do get a season 3, if we don't get it for another year like this happened, I'm very interested to see how the fandom falls apart over this, because I can see it happening.
Right.
Because they're already starting to the strength of friendships are starting to fray and crackle because people say, oh, I like the episode, and they're how could you like this episode? Somebody died. And I'm and so they're getting angry at each other. And I'm this is the moment when you step away, take a moment, and then come back to talking about your favorite show.
Right. Yeah.
But overall, I didn't hate the episode. I thought it was rushed because this whole season has been rushed, but it was funny. It was fun. The scene with Ed, getting his leathers out of the ocean miraculously, and then somehow getting the leathers back on his body while they're wet. Again, logic doesn't matter on this show. But then him coming across these soldiers as they're reading one of Steed's letters. I'm just this is the logic of this show. It's just so ridiculous. This is why I love it. There's no way on God's green earth that he should have found that letter. There is no way. And then he reads it, and then he runs off going, "You wrote me a lovely letter." And I'm like, it's so cheesy. I love it. I just enjoyed myself immensely. But and them at the end being like, you know what? We're gonna be innkeepers, and this house is a piece of shit, but we can do it. And I'm just like, you guys don't know anything about anything. You are going to destroy each other in 5 minutes. I'm interested to see. I'm interested to see where they take that in season 3. Because in an interview, David Jenkins did say that he wants them to be innkeepers in season 3 and to show how terrible at innkeeping they would be. So I'm like, oh, so for an episode, they're going to be innkeepers and then they're going to go back to pirating because that's what they need to be doing. But, it was a nice, happy ending to a season, which we've needed, this year and in the current climate. Like, we just need a happy queer ending for a couple. Like, just let them be happy, standing in the sunset with their piece of shit shack and believing that they can be innkeepers.
Yeah. Let's move on to our next show. Loki Season 2, Episode 4, entitled Heart of the TVA. And I caught up on this, watched last week's episode and this week's episode. And I quite like this episode. I think I should start off the bat here by saying Jonathan Majors is an extremely weird part of the show. He's giving a technically good performance that I should care about, but I don't, because Jonathan Majors is a bad person. So that's that. Overall, I quite like this episode. It does things that I did not expect it to. It goes harder than I would expect a Marvel Marvel anything to go. The fact that multiple characters were killed off in this episode by getting smushed to death by a magic box is a lot harder than
I did not watch the episode, so really?
Yes. Yes. I enjoy it. It's a lot of like timey-wimey sci-fi shenanigans stuff. There's a great conversation between Loki and Sylvie in this episode, basically talking about the TVA and like the future of the TVA. Yeah, there's no reason to trust. Like, Sylvie's right. Systemic structures fall apart. Like, the very nature of them is that they corrupt themselves, So there's no hope. There's no real hope that's like, oh, this is a thing that will always be good to people, because that is not the nature of systems.
Right.
So like she's right. She's 100% right. This should be burned to the ground. But we are on the road we're on. Yeah, and I like the reveal of Renslayer's back history, which is like, oh yeah, I should have picked up on that, because I know I know a thing or two about Kang's comic book story. So it's like I should have known that.
Okay, gotcha.
I should have known this. So let's move on to our next show, which is Found Season 1, Episode 4, Missing While a Pawn. And I've still not caught up on this. So tell me a bit about this week's episode.
So this week we get to see a bit more of the mental breakdown of Gabby. And we learn more about her time in captivity with Sir. It turns out that during her time before the young girl came along that ends up being Lacey. I forget what the girl's name was when they were in captivity. But anyway, she... before that girl gets taken by Sir, Gabby finds inside one of the books that Sir makes her read a note from a previous girl that said she had been there for like be there. She'd been there like almost a year, and that she was going to live, but like Gabby hasn't ever heard from her, and so we go back to present, and Gabby is still looking for this girl. And that kind of plays in the background of them looking for this little boy. And the fact that they're looking for a child this episode, like, really affects a few of the members on the team for obvious reasons. But they end up finding the little boy, and it turns out that he's being manipulated by a teenage boy that he hangs out with at the church, and that boy was being manipulated by sex traffickers. So like this weird convoluted sex trafficking storyline. Whatever. But the case itself was just kind of like, whatever. I found it more compelling to watch what was going on with Gabby, because she has like a full meltdown at the end of the episode. Like, she's getting the meal ready for Sir, and then she just throws it around the kitchen, and she throws dishes around, and she ends up on the floor sobbing because she's frustrated because she cannot find this girl, and she wants to find this girl. She wants to make sure that this girl was okay, that she ended up alive, because I think in her heart she knows that the girl's not alive, because why else would he have stolen her? But it's definitely getting things more complicated and messy, because Lacey's also starting to realize that Gabby is lying to her about Sir, but she doesn't know what it is about Sir that she's lying about. She just has picked up on the tells that she's lying. So it's going to be very interesting in the next few weeks to see where those relationships are going to go.
Nice. I look forward to catching up with it. Let's move on to our next show. So it's Quantum Leap, Season 2, Episode 4, titled The Lonely Hearts Club. And so this kind of gets more into like the rhythm of Quantum Leap and like the actual structure of the organization.
It took me until this episode to realize that Ziggy is the computer. I was like, who is Ziggy? Which character is Ziggy? I'm so confused. Oh, anyways, that's my dumb moment for the episode. I'm intrigued to find out where this is going with the information thing. Like, where that Ian finds out that it's like siphoning more information or whatever. That's interesting to me. I don't know.
Yeah, it sets up a possible antagonist for the season with Ian's partner's boss. Yes. We've been working with Ian's partner, who I've mentally started referring to as not Lena Luthor. but also bringing in Addison's boyfriend into the mix.
Yeah.
Who I don't trust.
I don't trust him either. And I was like, I hope this isn't just me because I don't know much about the show. But like, I was like, I don't trust this guy.
No, I don't trust this guy either.
Okay, good to know. It was a little, I will say at the end when he tells Addison, you can't be my hologram anymore, like my whatever anymore, I was a little saddened by it. But at the same time, I'm like, good. You need to separate yourself from her for a little bit just to like get your bearings again, because you have been gone for 3 years, sir.
Right. And you're making decisions that are crazy. I did like the themes of the episode, even if they are a bit heavy-handed, with Ben struggles, with Addison mirroring his leap. But
I think it's hilarious that he leaped into a female body. Like, I just find that very funny.
Right. And like, that is an interesting thing about this episode for me, because historically in Quantum Leap, when like, you know, Sam Beckett in the original series or Ben here would leap into a woman's body, it's always very like feminized, you know. It's an excuse to get them in like wearing a dress or wearing a skirt or something, you know. But here it is so buttoned up. Like, it is just a professional woman doing her job, that she could have easily been a man. you know?
And I love that when he like kind of slips up and is like, my ex-girlfriend, like the actor guy was just like, he was just like, oh, you're what? Like he was kind of like, oh, you're gay. Like he was just like, okay, cool.
Right, and it is the benefit of doing the show now versus like the original series in the 80s, of being able to go back in time to the 2000s. You know, I think this was
Mhm.
in this episode was in the year 2000, which was not great progressive wise, but was better. Was enough to be like, oh yeah, you're gay, okay, and we don't
Yep.
need to super spend time on this. You know, like
Right. Like that didn't end up being I was like nervous that it was going to end up being even a minor plot line, and it wasn't anything. He just was like, okay, whatever. And it never got brought up again, whatever. The actor was more concerned about his failed relationship with his wife. And I'm like, bro, that ship has sailed long ago.
that's
She's getting married.
that's
Like, let it go. Let it go, sir.
Yep.
She is getting married.
Yep. This ain't happening, my guy.
Also, them saying you need to get him to the Tonight Show with Jay Leno. I was just like, oh my god, it is the 2000s.
Oh yeah. It's like, oh,
we're committing to this.
we're really taking it back.
Oh man, but it was a fun episode.
Yeah, and I liked Tim Madison. That's the guy we're hoping this week.
Yes,
Tim Madison, very good actor. I enjoy.
And I love that, like, when they help him, this is before, this is right when he, like, obviously tells Addison they can't be doing stuff together anymore. But, like, Addison's like, now we have 7 more films to watch. And it's just, like, it's so funny to watch that, like, because, again, I don't really have much experience with this show. So, like, I don't think about how, like, when they change the past, like, it affects the future, too. And, like, yeah, so it was one of those, oh, that's cool.
It is always funny because like in the original series you never had like a sense of like what was going on in like present day. So like Scott Bakula could just change the future and we would just be like, I don't know, it's whatever's happening there. But now that we like so explicitly know what's happening in the present day, it has to change things so minutely. It doesn't actually change the timeline, but things are actually changed.
Yeah.
It can't change our actual what's happened on the show, which like, Timeless did that a lot.
Where it like changed what happened on the show.
Yeah, it'd be like they came back and it's like, oh, things are different now.
Yeah.
Quantum Leap can't really do that.
It would be interesting if it could, because like I feel like all these other like things that I've watched or I've read where they deal with going back in time and stuff and like changing things, it has affected the whole entire world, not just that little piece of the world that they were messing with.
So our next show for this week is Star Trek Lower Decks Season 4, Episode 9, titled The Inner Fight. And this episode really narrows in on Beckett's self-destructive tendencies over the season. And really makes the case that she has massive unresolved trauma in regards to her friend's death, Cedo Jaxa, and being involved in the Dominion War that she wanted no part of.
Yeah, it was very interesting to see this depth come into this character, and I really enjoyed it. And I kind of wanted to just give her a big hug.
Right.
But yeah, it was just very much more of, okay, Beckett is very self-destructive, but now we have a reason behind why she is. And maybe now we can help her heal that part of herself.
Right. Well, and I kind of love the way that it layers in Cedo of starting the episode being like, we have to find this guy who was involved in like a training accident at the academy, and it makes
Mhm.
you remember like, oh yeah, that thing that Wesley Crusher was involved in.
Mhm.
And then when the episode brings up Sito again, you're like, right, she did die. Oh, right.
Yeah.
What about her for Mariner? Like, that's just so sad for Mariner, who,
Yeah.
you know, obviously loved her friend.
And like when she's talking about it, like it's just so heartbreaking because she's not really a character that kind of breaks down like that ever. And so like to have her have that vulnerability, it's just it tugs at your heartstrings.
Right. And then to hear her bring up the Dominion War from Deep Space Nine. That a lot of Star Trek has just been like, yeah, that was a crazy thing to happen. But was like was like a major fracture of like Starfleet ideals, and was a real bad time. Like, it was just a real bad time overall. And to really see like that reconciliation here of like Beckett is someone who it's kind of like fun and freewheeling, but also would have seen major scores of her friend Sai. And before she even had the chance to recover from Sito's death, she was plunged into like this whole ass war.
Yeah. Yeah. And she wasn't, seasoned or like, older and experienced, and like she just got thrown into it.
Right. Yeah. It does once again bring up the question of when exactly does Lower Decks take place?
Mm-hmm.
Because there are times it's the nebulous nature of Lower Decks as a show where it could conceivably exist anywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
It could exist at any time, but here it feels like it dates itself kind of in like,
Because they don't really do, like the other Star Trek shows, or at least the ones that I've seen, because I haven't seen all of them. They do like they mention the star date like frequently.
right.
And in Lower Decks, I realized that I'm like, we don't really ever hear the star date. It's just like, it's whatever.
Right, it's supposed to be post canon, like post TNG, post Deep Space Nine, post Voyager, so that we can meet all of those people again and go to all these
Right.
places, but in the vaguest way possible.
Mm-hmm.
It never fully wants to commit, but here it feels like it's like whatever the Star Trek equivalent would be of like the mid to late 2000s, you know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Long enough that like Deep Space Nine is well past, the Dominion War is well past, and enough time that like Beckett would have like failed through multiple promotions.
Yes.
But it's very much a thing of like, don't worry about it.
Just don't worry about it. Because then also you have to look at it, they don't look that old either. Like, so then you got to think about, okay, well, how old are these characters?
Right, and is Mariner notably older than like Boimler?
Right, because they don't look like they're older than, difference in age, but
she'd have to be noticeably old. She'd have to be notably older than he is.
Yeah, because he's definitely like young. You can just tell in like everything.
Yeah, and she's been around the block.
Yep.
But I do love Boimler and Tendi and Tiana trying to work with Mariner and like recognize what she's been doing, And I love how not for this shit Tiana is. Like,
Yes.
she is not having it.
Nope.
That is so good. It's like, she's that wonderful kind of Vulcan presence where she's just like, nope, I'm not doing this. I'm not putting up with this. No.
And I love that Boimler's like, but I can trust each of you to fight with me because, like, you guys are strong and all this. And she's just like, no.
No. Absolutely not. Yeah, it's a very fun episode.
Yeah. It was. And next week's finale is going to be interesting, I'm sure.
It's going to be bonkers. It's always bonkers. Yeah. Now, next week is the last week of Star Trek for this year. And I don't know that that means it won't be a while till I get to watch Star Trek again. I just don't know what to do with that emotion.
Go back to the beginning and rewatch.
Right. Well, like, I've had Star Trek consistently all throughout the year.
Yeah. Between Strange New Worlds and this, yeah.
Well, like, there was... I can't remember if Disco was this year, or at the beginning of this year, but I had, like, Picard and then Strange New Worlds, and...
I do think maybe Discovery was.
When did Discovery come out?
I feel like it maybe was. I don't know. I could be wrong. There's a lot of things I'm wrong about in life, so I could be wrong.
Oh, no, that was last year. Jesus, that was already last year. God damn. That was last year.
Yeah, but we still had Picard and Strange New Worlds and this. So, like, yeah, you've had a year of Star Trek.
Yeah. So it's going to be weird going from, like, so much Star Trek to no Star Trek. And I don't know the next time I will have Star Trek. Maybe Discovery. I don't know when Discovery comes out again. Oh, well. Them's the breaks. So that is it for this week. We have nothing major planned for next week, in lieu of waiting to see what the SAG-AFTRA does. And if any kind of deal is made. So
we will have to see.
We'll have to see. Until then, Mads, where can we find you online?
So I am on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at DorothyNYC89. And I'm on Blue Sky too with the same name, but I'm never on Blue Sky, so I don't know if it's worth it to follow me on Blue Sky.
And I am on Twitter, Blue Sky. I have a TikTok, but I'm not using my TikTok anymore. I am on Serialized, where I'm logging all my TV from the week, and my writing, whatever there is at drewkoenig.substack.com. And you can follow the podcast at Not a TV Pod on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Blue Sky. And you can find previous episodes of the podcast on Apple Podcasts and YouTube.
Nice.
And feel free to leave us a review and subscribe. Any bit helps. I don't know how much it helps at this point, because Apple's algorithm terrifies and confuses me. Until next week, never forget, don't go in the ocean. It's none of your business. Goodbye.
Goodbye.